today about young people in politics and, you know, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what kind of activism there is going on. And Aisha is sort of very aware of all of these things. So maybe we can get started by, what do you see with your friends, like at school? Are they involved? Do they not want to think about it? Is it overwhelming? Like, what's going on with people your age?
Well, with my specific friend group, we've got a lot going on. And I think when I talk to them about it, they definitely do get overwhelmed, because there are certain aspects of what Trump is doing that will affect us directly within the next couple of years. And I think that's scary to think about.
What kinds of things are you thinking?
The environment specifically, I think that's something that will hit everyone. And with race, it's different, because only certain people feel it or know that it exists or understand it. And I don't think that's anyone's fault specifically. I just think that that's the way it is.
When people get overwhelmed with the whole political scene, do you think it makes them want to do something, or do you think it makes them want to just sort of hide and not think about it?
I think definitely the route that people are taking is not thinking about it.
And it's really important for people to stay engaged and to understand what's going on. So what do you think we can do as in general to sort of keep it in front of people? And my next question is, do you think people realize they can actually make a change, or do you think they think government is some faraway thing that they have no control over? Do you think they realize that they are the government?
I think a lot of people think that they don't have the power to make the change, and I think they don't realize that if they're not part of the solution, then they're part of the problem. But there are definitely people who are taking ownership of that and are making a difference, and I think the marches are a great example of how people are getting involved. The March for Our Lives, a lot of people, BBA students went, and it was really empowering, and I think they felt that from everyone else. They felt that they weren't just one person in this huge world. They were one person that could make a difference, and that their voice could be heard. So I think that was really empowering.
Can you tell us a little bit about the March for Our Lives? Like, what was that all about? What was it connected with? Was it a nationwide thing? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, the March for Our Lives was mainly for gun control. It wasn't, a lot of people thought it was pro-gun or anti-gun, but that's not what it was about. It was about safety and about the usage of guns and the laws behind them. A lot of people went that are gun owners, and I thought that was really interesting, because they were aware that it's not directed, it's not, you know, it's not intended to ostracize that group of people. It's only intended to make the world a safer place. And there's many countries who have put in laws that, and they don't have any school shootings or mass shootings. And I think it's time that the United States catches on with that.
And so the whole thing is not about taking away rights to own gun. It's just about what are the things we can do to not have these mass shootings, like to prevent them.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the whole mental illness aspect of it? Because, you know, that's a huge thing. It's like, are we addressing these problems? Why are these people getting guns? You know, just
Right.
What do you think about that whole part of it?
Well, everyone has mental health issues in different countries, and I think that it's naive to say that that's the reason that the United States has those, because there's people all over the world that have mental health issues, but because laws are put in place, they don't have the ability to get those weapons to make that kind of impact on the world. But it definitely speaks for our healthcare system, and quite frankly, we're declining on that as well. So I think even if we did place the blame on mental health, what are we doing to solve that? Instead of putting more money towards mental health, we're making it so that less and less people have the health care that they need.
Do you see that happening with your friends? Like, do you see concrete evidence of that, like in the people around you, that they're having more issues with health coverage or whatever, or you haven't seen that quite yet?
I feel like I live in a pretty privileged area, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but there are times where I have to take a step back and realize that, the world that I live in here in Manchester, Vermont, is nothing like where a lot of people, even in the United States, live. And I think it's easier with my background just because I've grown up in a different way. It's easier for me to have a different perspective. But when I think about people here not having that different perspective, I can easily see how it's hard to get lost and not realize that, this world that we live in is quite different than basically everyone's world is different, and that we might be the last to get the effect of environmental issues, of racism, because, because of where people come from, and also financial issues. A lot of people are pretty well off, and that's not necessarily, not everyone, obviously, but the people that you hear, I feel like a lot of times have that voice because they're in that position to say what they believe, which is why I'm very grateful for this opportunity, because I love being able to express myself and talk about these issues that are very important to me.
Do you think people who don't have to worry about these things sort of put them to the side and don't care about them as much because they don't have to worry about it? Or do you think they care and they just don't know what to do because it's not really affecting them? Or
I think it's probably a combination of both of those things. I mean, I can speak for myself. When Donald Trump was elected is when I started to get involved. And so I've tried to kind of put that into perspective, and the main reason that it started affecting me was because he would say all these horrible comments about Mexicans, and that's my family. And then slowly I started to get more and more into it, and realize that it really does directly affect everyone, whether or not we see it. But I do think that when it doesn't directly affect you or directly, hit a nerve, that it's easier to pull it aside and say, you know what, that's not my issue. I've got plenty of other things going on right now.
do you have any thoughts about why the discourse is what it is now? Do you think it's coming just personally from a personal perspective, or do you think there's an attempt to cause division, or why do you think our president is being so disrespectful to so many people, whether they're disabled or from another country? Or what do you think that's on purpose, or where do you think that's coming from?
I do think it's on purpose. I do think that he's gaining a lot of power from our division, and the United States isn't so united anymore. I have always kind of thought that maybe it was a blessing in disguise, and that we have a lot of problems within the United States, and now they're just being brought to light. But also, what are we doing to fix those problems is kind of the next question.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it is good that they're being brought to light because we do need to fix them. So what about, you want to talk a little bit about how you feel the environment's being affected and why that bothers you and what you think people can do about it? It's a big topic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No worries. I think that the environment is probably one of the things that we should all be able to agree on will affect us all. And things like pulling out of the Paris Agreement and, stopping bans that were meant to save the earth, that are simple and small, that everyone else is doing but the United States. I think that's just a really stupid thing to do. There are plenty of little things that we could do as a community and as a whole that would make such a big difference, because the United States takes up 25% of natural resources. We're a big country, we're a big place with a lot of people that are using a lot of things, and a lot of those things are bad for the earth. Plastic bags. In Canada, you have to pay for your plastic bags but a significant amount. And if you don't bring your reusable bags, you have to pay an extra $3 or something. I think there was another country too. I'm not sure if I'm getting those mixed up, but I just was looking at that for a AP Lang project, and it was really interesting because here, you know, you hardly ever see people thinking of plastic bags as such a negative thing.
It's kind of like our lives are so busy that we don't think about those little things, like we go to the store after work and we have to get groceries and, you know, they're throwing them into plastic bags and we don't even think about it.
Yeah.
But what are things we can do on a local level? Because I do think that everything starts local and then builds into something bigger. But what can we do locally, do you think, to make some small changes that might mean something?
I think awareness is the biggest thing because, for example, there's always going to be times where you forget your reusable bags, and that's okay. And I don't want to be that person that, you know, just gets super mad or annoyed, but I really think that it's about being aware. You know, you see that plastic bag and you're like, oh man, I forgot my reusable bag. You know, if that crosses your mind, I think then we're on the right direction. Recycling. I think recycling is super important and something easy that we can do. Something as simple as turning off the lights when you leave a room. It's something that you don't see the direct effect of, but if you were to like have a way to see how every single little thing connects in the world, then I think you'd see that, you know, that little thing, even if it's just for your mental well-being, or to make you feel like you are making that small difference. Because if everyone did that, then we would be making a difference.
So what do you think about this? I was listening to this story on NPR on the way into work this morning, and it was a community who wanted to ban the sale of single-use water bottles at little delis and stuff. And so there was this back and forth, and I understood both sides that, you know, the store owners, that's like a source of income for them to be able to sell those bottles. And yet the people who wanted to conserve and not use so much plastic, they have a point as well. What do you think about that story? That's a tough one for me.
That is a tough one.
Yeah.
I have one friend, she's one of my best friends, and it's so funny because she always has plastic water bottles in her room. And we always go back and forth on like, I'm like, stop using, because she has so many in her room, and she always like puts them all out when I get there, specifically to, you know, it's a funny thing. But I personally think that if we stopped using those plastic water bottles, it would make a huge difference, especially because we're in a country where we do have the privilege of tap water. Probably not all over the country, but here in Vermont, we do have that privilege. So having, you know, your metal water bottle that you bring around is not only, you know, more environmentally friendly, but it's also, you're going to be more hydrated because you have the opportunity to refill that over and over again. Whereas a plastic water bottle, if you put that in the heat, then it actually damages. It's not good for you.
It leaches something into the water. Yeah.
So not only are you helping yourself, but you're also helping the greater good. So I don't really see what the big deal of, you know, getting rid of that would be, other than, you know, I know that it would affect those small local, you know,
maybe
stores and stuff.
They could maybe start selling like reasonably priced water bottles that are reusable or something.
Yeah, for sure. And they could have their
fill them
logo
for
on it or
free.
something,
Yeah.
and you could fill it for free.
Yeah, that would be
I think Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks have started to kind of do that, which is
Yeah.
good,
Yeah.
because they also have those plastic things. And I was guilty of using, I remember I would use one, and then I'd always feel guilty. So the next time I brought like a jar, and I just used that. And I think it's pretty simple to make that switch if you're just mindful of it.
Yeah, I was really impressed with a couple of the elementary schools around here. They put in these water fountains where you fill, and then it tells you like how many bottles of water you've saved. So I was there like one time, and it was like 800, you saved 800 plastic bottles. And then I was there not long after, and it was like 1,400. And so they really are saving a lot of plastic bottles by using things like that.
Those are great. I love those.
Those are good. Do you have them in your school as well?
I was just trying to think. I think we have a couple, but not a ton. Yeah, but we have a significant amount, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we've talked a little bit about the environment. We've talked about the march. I'm curious about, what do you think will inspire people your age to care about voting, you know, care about who they put into office, who's in office? what will inspire them to move from being overwhelmed by it all and too busy to think about it to actually getting involved and caring enough to vote and do all these things? And then my second question is the whole social media aspect of information, and how are your colleagues and cohorts taking in information? Are they getting it all from one place? Are they wise enough to think, well, that sounds like a weird story, but I'm going to check 3 sources before I know what to believe? Like, how are they interpreting information?
Well, I think after the March for Our Lives, I felt like there was some momentum. And I think maybe it will take another march or another something that will continue that momentum. But I definitely think that those types of things help people realize that it all starts local at the grassroots level, and that voting, even in your town or your state, voting is really important. And that's where it starts, and then slowly you can build your way up. But I definitely think that people will slowly start to realize that their voice does matter and their vote is a privilege, and that not everyone has that, has that privilege. And that people fought to have, women, it took us a while to be able to vote, and, I personally will use that vote very wisely, and I'll do my research, and I'm honored to be able to vote and have a say in what happens in this country and what happens in this state, what happens in this town. So I think that people will slowly realize that it is up to them to make use of that. And as far as social media, that's a tough one, because I think people do have the knowledge, or at least my classmates have the knowledge to look at multiple resources. But I do think that more and more it's easy to find things that aren't true on multiple websites. And basically I've found that you can say whatever, you can, look up whatever you think, and you can find it in different places. I feel like the internet's almost lost some of its value, because you can find whichever answer you want, you can find on the internet. And it's weird, because I always used to use it as a resource and would look at things and be like, oh, well, this must be true. But now more and more I'm realizing just because I found it there doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And also, is it perspective or is it fact? And I think that's a really huge thing.
What would you say to people, what is the way to get an accurate picture of something that's going on? Do you have any thoughts or advice about what people could do to actually find out what the real truth is about something?
Right. Well, I think a lot of times it's 2 extremes, and if you find that middle, I don't know where exactly it would be, but finding that middle ground of, okay, well, this person's saying this and this person's saying this. They're both very extreme things. It's probably somewhere in the middle. But also not being so hung up on all the things that are the news and stuff, because in reality, I think that's Trump's way of kind of distracting us from what other things are going on. And the fact of the matter, too, is people get to decide what gets put on the news. It's not necessarily things that we want to be paying attention to. As important as it is to address the issues, I think more we see it as a source of entertainment, and I think that that's kind of really messed up.
Where do you get your news from, your sources? Where do you get the information that you need to make decisions about issues?
I mainly pay attention to laws being passed, and I don't pay attention to stories as much just because they really upset me. So I usually pick a topic, say it's immigration or environment or racism or, equality or something. Those are pretty broad, but I usually pick one of them, and if I see a news article on any of them or any issue really, I kind of just dig deeper into that certain issue and look at what laws have been passed and kind of what's going on in general instead of a story. Just because as much as it's probably heartbreaking or truly heroic, I don't really know where it's coming from or what the perspective of it was. And, you know, as far as heroic, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on. I've, you know, looked, my mom showed me these really incredible, like this young man stepped in front of a shooter and he got shot, but he would have shot like a ton of, it was a preschool, and that wasn't on the news because of his race. You know, they didn't, and my mom was like, you didn't hear about that? I was like, no, I didn't hear about that. And she was like, oh, it was like a month ago. I was like, well, why don't people know about this? And I think, I could be jumping to assumptions, but I think it's because of his race, and because right now we're highlighting certain races in a really negative manner, while if a white person were to make that same save, he would be all over the news.
Yeah.
But if, you know, a black person were to commit a felony, then that would also be all over the news. So I just try to kind of steer clear of certain stories.
Where do you think that stuff comes from? I mean, I feel like there's so many people that, you know, are just, that aren't like that. Do you think that's an example coming down from the top, that people are thinking it's okay to do things like that, to not put a story up or put a story up depending on a person's race? Like, where are we with all of that? You know, for a while it seemed like things were going in the right direction.
Yeah.
Now it seems like they're not again. And
Yeah, I think it's a curious thing because personally, I wasn't as aware of all of these issues before Trump was elected, and now they're being, like we talked about, brought into light.
so
And
you think they were always there? It's just that
I
we
don't
weren't-
know. I don't know if they were brought up because he said it was, now he says it's okay to be racist in that way, and they're like, oh, okay, well, now I can be open about this. Or if it's all kind of feeding into it, or if it's bringing up things from the past.
I'm curious a lot of times, like where this hatred comes from when I see things on the news and I see people's faces and they're just so filled with rage and hate. I'm just so curious about what their experiences were that they turned into a person that feels this way.
Right. Well, I think it's really interesting because when you focus on the minorities, those who aren't minorities feel like they're being attacked. You know, the whole Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter situation. And I think it's really hard to bring people who have been suppressed up while maintaining the people who haven't on the same level. And I think that's something that we all struggle with and probably all have a different idea of how to deal with. But I think for us to realize that we're all doing our best with that, or maybe not all of us, but you know, the people who are saying Black Lives Matter, a lot of them are just saying, you know what, these people have been suppressed for so long, they haven't had the same quality, they haven't had the same rights that we have, haven't been treated the same way. You know what, they matter too. Whereas that we're not saying that the rest of the races don't matter. And I think that's something that people, instead of taking it for word, need to just understand that we're making an effort to help those people get brought up. We're not trying to bring the rest of everyone else down.
Right, the goal is to get to a place where everyone is equal all of the time in all situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really tough thing.
I know.
Yeah.
It is.
But we have to keep like trying. And
we really do. Just because it gets difficult doesn't mean it's time to quit.
Yeah.
It's probably time to even rally it up a little bit more.
I know.
Yeah.
I did want to just go back briefly to the whole social media thing and ask you if you thought that the reason people share stories, sensational stories, are because they're exciting and they're inserting a little adrenaline into the day, and we're so used to reality TV that it feels normal, or do you think it's something else? Like, I'm really curious about why people don't stop for a second before they pass it along to all of their friends, and then their friends pass it along to all of their friends. Like, I'm curious about why people don't stop for a second and say, wait a minute, is this for real? Or, I'm
Right.
just curious about that.
Well, actually, that's really interesting because just the other day I was liking something on Instagram, and it was like it's called Let's Give, and it was just this organization that tries to help people who, different countries that are going through different things. And I don't know if this is for everyone, but I think that sometimes liking something or sharing it, even if it's an awful thing or if it's a great thing, if it has to do with politics or has to do with helping people or has to do with the greater good, I think that like or that share makes you feel like you're doing something.
That's interesting.
And I think that's really bad.
It's a very sort of easy thing to do,
Yeah,
a superficial
because
thing
it's
to do.
not doing anything.
Yeah.
And I find myself feeling weird liking it now that that crossed my mind. Now whenever I like something, I'm like, okay, well, you're not doing, just so you know, you're not really doing anything by just liking this picture or this video or commenting great on something or, nice work or sharing a video. You're not doing anything besides passing it along to the rest of people who will probably do the same exact thing.
It's kind of good in a little bit of a way, like I see like a little ray of sunshine in there, in that it means that people want to do something good
Yeah.
and they want to help.
Right.
But we just have to people just have to figure out what ways actually help.
Right.
And actually do something to make changes.
I mean, I definitely think that it's challenging to figure that out too. I mean, right now I'm at a place where there's no marches going on. There's nothing. I can't go to speak at town hall meetings. I'm kind of like, okay,
what can I do?
What can I do? What do I do next? And I think that's when you realize that once you can't do anything kind of to the outer, it's within yourself. And the simple things like recycling, the simple things like, our water is precious. That's another thing that I think we don't realize is there's so many droughts going on right now even within our country. There, not to mention the whole world. There's been, for example, Mexico City hasn't had clean water in so long. My grandparents went without clean water for a couple months, and that was something that was not necessarily abnormal to them. I was like, what? Like, what are you doing? How do you wash dishes? How do you do all this stuff? And they had to, buy all those resources. And we have the luxury of having it, so much to the point where we think that we can leave the faucet running and it's not a big deal. Yeah. And as much as it's not going to affect us right now, or we don't see the consequences right now, I think it's just respectful to be aware of the environment that you live in and to conserve it as much as possible, regardless of the quantity that you have of it right now. So,
and they do say that change starts with each little individual action by each person, and collectively it turns into something good in the end.
Yeah, and I think you feel good within yourself too. I know whenever I have those thoughts or turn off the water, or I'm just like, okay, you know what, maybe I'm not doing everything I can to make the world a better place and to make the environment a better place, but I'm doing the simple things at least.
That was just a positive, instead of a negative. You added something instead of taking something away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
really cool. Do you want to talk about immigration at all, or
Yeah. That's definitely a challenging topic for me because it definitely hits home literally. But I've tried to kind of see everyone's perspective, and I understand that certain people think that people coming into the United States to work illegally is taking jobs away from certain people. And I've kind of tried to see how that's all playing out with the whole deportation and all of that. And I kind of stand true to what I believed originally. And there's so many jobs that right now aren't being done because people here don't want to do them. And that's fine. But I don't see the harm in letting other people do them. There's so many places in California, the farms right now are like actually dying because there's not enough people to work at them. And there's so many people living in fear, even that do have their green card or all of that don't need to, that it's just unnecessary to put someone through that, I think. I also think that the way that they're deporting people and tearing families apart is like insane. It's you know, I've seen pictures and I don't know what to believe and what not to believe, but the pictures of where the kids are staying it's child abuse. It's really not okay. And even if you have those beliefs about them going back to where they came from, then I think we have to do it in a more respectful or more, you know, humane way. Yeah. Because right now it's atrocious the way it's happening, and I can't even really look at it because I cry. But I think that if we have a different perspective of, you know, it's not those people, you know, we're all one. No matter your race, no matter your gender, at the end of the day, we're all humans, so I don't really understand the need for that divide. And so many different, you know, with religions, with all sorts of things, I don't really understand that need for divide.
And the divide, I think, should be, you know, like, are you a good person? Do you want to do good things? Do you want to come for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons? And that's the divide. It's not who you are or what country you're from or any of that stuff.
And I think that's a really good point with the immigration piece. A lot of people are labeling a certain race as one thing.
Yeah.
You know, Trump, in his words, he called them all rapists and drug dealers. And I can speak for my family, and none of them are that. They're pretty, actually, incredible people. I'm a U.S. citizen. When I traveled to Europe, my parents kept texting me over and over again, and I didn't realize why. And then I realized I'm about to go through customs. They're terrified, that's why. I literally just sent the text, you know, I'm about to go through customs, and I got like so many text messages like, are you okay? Everything good? Blah, 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 blah. So,
that's a tough thing.
Yeah.
I just wish that every mother and father who doesn't have to think about those things at all would seriously think about how they would feel if they were trying to go somewhere to like have a better life for themselves and their kids, and someone made them sign a piece of paper that they didn't really understand and took their kid away.
Yeah.
And I would want them all to think seriously about what that would feel like. Think about how different it is, because my grandfather came over from Italy and went to Ellis Island, and you know, then it was this welcoming place where the United States just sort of welcomed immigrants from all over the world.
It's called the land of the free.
Yeah, it's just so different now.
So different. Well, when people say things like the land of the free, or when even simple things like national anthem, and I don't sit for it, but I do feel kind of odd praising a country that I'm not happy with right now.
Well, that brings up the whole kneeling at the sports games and all that stuff. And I don't know what your feeling is about that, but for me it's like, you know, it's First Amendment rights. No one's disrespecting the flag or the anthem or the country. We're just trying to make a point.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it was the best way, because I definitely got people riled up in a way that probably didn't serve anyone. But I also agree, I think, and also it's these, you know, super popular athletes that people will pay attention to, whether it be for the negative or positive reasons. And I kind of praise them for having the guts to take that stand in front of national television. You know, I think that they're using their power in maybe not the best way that they could have, but I think the fact that they're doing something is good.
Also, it doesn't help that, you know, we have politicians at the top who are mischaracterizing what they're doing and saying, oh, they hate the flag, they hate the country. That's not what it's about.
No. I try to just think of it as a positive, as the, you know, the actual United States, the land of the free, what it used to be and what it still can be with work.
And exactly. I mean, I feel like America is great. It always has been great. It's just that we need all good people to come together and keep moving forward in ways that are good for all of the people who live here.
We've definitely had historical bad moments as a country, but I think that there is that still greatness about it. The privilege doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. It can be something that we share and that can help I think that that's the biggest thing, is that as the most powerful country in the world, we're not using our power in a very positive manner right now.
Yeah, because I think it always boils down to power, money, greed. You know, it's like that's what steers us wrong every single time.
Yeah.
You know, need for control, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
So we're better than that, I think.
for sure.
Yeah. So what else? What other issues do you want to talk about?
Well, I think there's simple things like education. I think that, what Bernie Sanders was trying to do, maybe it was a crazy thought, maybe it wasn't. I think he had the right idea. The whole, I don't think it should be up to money whether or not you get the education that it's a right. I think it should be a right. Because the way that you can, get out of poverty or get out of whatever, if you're not happy where you are financially, without an education, nowadays it's really hard to get out of that.
Yeah.
And not saying it's not impossible, because I have many examples of it being very possible. But I think, equal opportunity to all when it comes to education for kids is really important. Yeah. And it's something that I think also has to do with social income and with race sometimes, just because a lot of people will be in, bad neighborhoods that don't have that education, or their education system is really poor. And I think that that's something that it's a simple fix that would benefit everyone. Yeah. So that's another thing where I'm just kind of lost as to where we disagree on that, because I feel like we would all agree that everyone has the right to an education and to learn and to have that opportunity to make a better life for themselves.
And fulfill their destiny, because even if it's not college, it could be a tech school where you learn how to be a computer programmer or whatever it is.
For sure.
Just to sort of get to see kids as individuals and what do they need, what are they good at, what do they like to do, and then help them get there however we can.
And I think that brings up a good point about how I think a lot of adults sometimes think that kids are, just kids, or teenagers are always on their phone and doing whatever. And as much as that may be true, we also, I think more and more are starting to pay attention to what's going on. And I personally believe that my opinion does matter, and I will be sharing it, whether it's well received or not. I'm not going to be disrespectful about it, but I'm not going to not say what I believe just because it's a room full of adults. I think that different perspectives are necessary and good, and maybe I see something completely different because I'm a different age, and that's okay. Yeah. But the fact that we can have a conversation and talk about it and have a better understanding and gain a different perspective, whether that changes yours or not, doesn't really matter. If you're open to that and you can understand people, then I think that's what all of our problems would be resolved by, is just not necessarily being convinced by anyone. You don't need to change your perspective, but you have to be open to listening to someone else's so that you can at least understand where they're coming from. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to understand why or how they could think that, but just having the wisdom to be able to listen and say, okay, well, now all of their beliefs make sense because they think this, and they're not just stupid or ignorant or and maybe at some cases, they definitely probably are not, seeing the whole picture, or maybe they are in the wrong. But I think giving that respect to someone will basically open up the conversation to have them give you that same respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, if we can talk to each other in a non-judgmental way. And just you're exactly right.
And I have a hard time with that sometimes, Yeah. When people insult, women or my country, I definitely don't have an easy time with that. Mm-hmm. But And I think, you know, my mom's a great example. She wouldn't take it. She would be very mad, and she wouldn't be disrespectful, but she would, you know, stand up for what she believes in. And I do too, but I try to do it in a kind of, like, I really try to listen to everything that they're saying, and then obviously there's certain people that I know exactly what they believe and their reasoning behind it, and then that's where I just like
There's also this whole thing though, you know, it's like I don't know if you do this, but I think about how people grow up and what their influences are, and little babies don't start out as angry, vengeful, you know, opinionated beings. They're just like there, and they're simple, and they love people, and so how does that over the years turn into something else?
Right. Well, that's what I had to explain to my brother, is because he was having some trouble. Well, people were not being very nice to him about, you know, saying that being Mexican is bad, or this was a while ago. He hasn't had any trouble since, but we had to explain to him that it's not that little kid speaking. It's probably his parents, and that I said, you know, now if mom and dad told you that Donald Trump was bad, but you didn't know any context and just said, you know, he's bad, would you believe him? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, exactly. Like,
because it's your parents.
Because it's your parents, and why would they ever lie to you? And they're probably not thinking that they're lying to you. It's just their perspective.
Right.
And he's a pretty brilliant little boy, so he understood pretty easily. But I definitely think that that's a big aspect and that's another thing, is my parents have always told me, you know, you believe what you want, you figure it out for yourself. And of course they've instilled certain beliefs on me, and I've kind of carried that throughout my life. So far, I'm pretty young still, but
it seems their beliefs about like being a good person.
Yeah, exactly. You know. And the whole idea that, you know, ask questions. That's what one of my favorite teachers at BBA always says, he's like, question everything. And my dad says that all the time. He's like, even if it's me, you can question me, because questions is how we figure out what we want to believe. They're not necessarily the right answers or the answers, but it helps us come to a conclusion of who we want to be and what we want to believe in. So I think that it's really important to put into perspective all of those things.
Yeah. So what do we do moving forward? How do we move forward? What do you think are some good ways to move forward?
I think it all starts locally, and I think it's really important especially for everyone, but for the younger generation that will be voting this coming year and the year after, to vote that first year. If you don't put in your vote, then you can't complain about the issues that are going on. And I think it's important to also educate yourself on that vote, because that vote does make a difference regardless of what you may or may not believe. I also think that simple environmental things are really important. Educating yourself so that you can have these conversations. And I think most importantly, it's not only important for the person that you're talking to, but for yourself, so that you can be confident in going in what you believe in and back up what you believe in, whether it's in agreement with me or not, or, you know, I think it's just really important to have those facts and those things to support your evidence. And then in a not local way, just continue those huge movements. I think it brought a lot of light to a lot of things, and I think we will be okay. I don't know when, but I think our country will probably get back up on its feet. But there's things like the environment that can't wait. Those things do need our help right now, and you know, we can't just wait till Trump's out of presidency, or if you like Trump, we can't, then still, whatever the case may be, the time is now with the environment. And just because the United States isn't getting the big effects on it, doesn't mean that one day we will. And when we do, we want to be ready, instead of, you know, a lot of people say that you don't pay attention to things until they directly impact you. We don't want to wait till it directly impacts us, because we will probably be the last ones to feel it, which means we're the last hope. So we really need to, you know, get on board now. And as the most powerful country in the world, I think it's important that we use that power in a positive manner to help our surrounding countries, to help within, and to just kind of be the United States that we strive to be.
And I love that, and I think it's important to have all of these conversations with kindness and respect for each other. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Aisha, for doing this.
Of course.
It was awesome, and hopefully you'll come back again.
Yeah, I'd love to come back.
Thank you.